Learning objectives. After completing this module, learners will be able to understand and describe the Vietnamese resistance to French domination and economic exploitation. Understand and explain how France steadily attempted to destroy the local culture and traditions of the Vietnamese people. Understand and describe the reasons for the outburst of plague in Hanoi. Understand and describe the Vietnamese resistance to the spread of Christianity. Understand and describe divided opinions amongst the Vietnamese nationalists. Understand and describe rise of communist movement and Vietnamese nationalism. Understand and describe the re-establishment of the new Republic of Vietnam. Explain the US-Vietnam conflict and its end through Paris Peace Treaty. Describe the role of women in different Vietnamese wars. Understand and explain the crucial role played by the Ho Chi Minh Trail in wars. The Nationalist movement in Indochina. Emerging from the shadow of China. The Indochina region in Southeast Asia lies to the east of India and south of China. This region, comprising of Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam today, was colonized by France in 19th century. People of different regions lived here under strong Chinese influence. Vietnam is also called the Maritime Silk Route, as it gave way to goods, people and ideas. Colonial domination and resistance. The French conquest of Vietnam began in 1858 and completed by 1885. Tonkin and Annam got under French control after the Franco-Chinese War, and in 1887 the French Indochina was formed. The French indulged in economic exploitation, military domination and tried to reshape the Vietnamese culture. The Vietnamese soon realized their suffering and gradually developed nationalist resistance against the French colonists. Why the French thought colonies necessary? Colonies were important to the mother country for economic purposes. Like other European nations, France also took upon itself to bring the benefits of civilization to the backward people. They constructed irrigation canals using forced labor in the Mekong Delta to increase agricultural production. By 1930, Vietnam became the third largest rice exporter in the world. Should colonies be developed? Colonies were to serve interests of the mother country was accepted universally. Eminent writer and policy maker Paul Bernard argued that economy of the colony should be strengthened to increase the purchasing power of the people. More purchases would mean more profits to France. The French, contrarily, did little to industrialize the Vietnamese economy. The dilemma of colonial education. Vietnam's intensive economic exploitation by France was followed by their civilizing mission. The French imposed their modern ideas on the locals at the cost of destruction of their culture, religion, and traditions. The Europeans considered it their duty to civilize the Asians and Africans. Talking modern. The French, in order to establish their dominance and minimize Chinese influence, introduced French as the medium of education. While some in Vietnam favored the traditional Chinese system of education, others believed learning French could expose Vietnamese to the superior French culture and civilization. The French deliberately disqualified Vietnamese students to prevent them from getting better jobs. Looking modern. The Tonkin Free School, established in 1907 to provide a Western-style education, emphasized modern looks along with modern education. It stressed on maintaining short hair, which was a departure from the traditional Vietnamese identity of keeping long hair. Resistance in schools. The students and teachers did not follow the curriculum prescribed by the French. Teachers often modified and criticized the text material. The students protested against the discriminatory policy of the colonial government to disqualify Vietnamese students from getting high-profile jobs. The French and the elite envisioned the student protest as a threat to their position. By 1920s, students formed numerous political parties like Party of Young Annan and brought out nationalist journals like Annanese Student. Their struggle against French colonial education became a battle against French colonialism and Vietnamese independence. Hygiene, disease, and everyday resistance. Other than educational institutes, the Vietnamese confronted the French in many other areas and ways. Plague strikes Hanoi. Insistent upon health and hygiene, the French wanted to modernize Vietnam. They employed the most modern architecture and latest engineering skills to modernize Hanoi. The French part of Hanoi had beautiful and wide avenues and a well-laid-out sewer system. All refuse from the native town, drained into the river, would overflow into the streets during rains. The large sewers in the Viet town turned into breeding grounds for rats. The rats could easily access different parts of the city and creep into the well-maintained houses of the French. Thus, the French city's symbol of modernity became a cause of plague in the city. The rat hunt. The French hired local Vietnamese to hunt the rats. They were paid per rat killed by them. Despite killing almost 20,000 rats per day, the menace was nowhere near the end. The locals who entered the sewers to catch rats got together to negotiate for a higher compensation. The compensation was paid when the tail of a rat was presented as proof. People would clip the tail and let the rat go. The tail would regrow in some time and would be used again for compensation. This system, however, did not contain the spread of plague. The French were forced to abandon it eventually. Religion and anti-colonialism. The French introduced Christianity in Vietnam and challenged Confucianism, the Chinese religion followed by many Vietnamese. Resistance to the spread of Christianity and French control led to the Scholars' Revolt in 1868 by the officials at the imperial court. The anti-French movement was supported by the religious group of the time called Huon Pho So, founded by Ho Hao. Though the French successfully crushed the movement, it inspired anti-imperialist sentiments in the Vietnamese people. The vision of modernization. All sections of the society shared the anti-imperialist sentiment. While some intellectuals believed in strengthening the Vietnamese culture to defy the French, others opined that the Vietnamese could learn from the West while opposing them. Nationalist Phan Boi Chau, 1867 to 1940, who authored The History of the Loss of Vietnam, resisted the French colonists by forming the Revolutionary Society Duy Tan Hoi in 1903, with Prince Quang Để as the head. Nationalist Phan Chu Trinh, 1871 to 1926, proposed establishment of a democratic republic by abolishing monarchy. Other ways of becoming modern: Japan and China. In the early 20th century, many Vietnamese students went to Japan to attain modern education, primarily to oust the French colonists, overthrow the puppet emperor, and re-establish the Nguyen dynasty. They set up a branch of the Restoration Society in Tokyo, which was repressed by the Japanese government after 1908. Many students, including Fan Boichao, were deported. End of monarchy in China in 1911 under Sun Yat-sen's leadership and establishment of a republic also inspired the Vietnamese nationalists. They now aimed at a democratic republic, not constitutional monarchy. The Communist movement and Vietnamese nationalism. The Great Depressions of 1930s caused widespread misery, rural deaths and rural uprisings in Vietnam, which were put down brutally by the French colonists. In February 1930, Ho Chi Minh unified various nationalist groups to form the Vietnamese Communist Party, later called the Indo-Chinese Communist Party. In 1940, Japan captured Vietnam was to increase its control on Southeast Asia. Vietnam now struggled against the French as well as the Japanese. The League for the Independence of Vietnam, Vietnam Doc Lap Dong Minh, also known as the Viet Minh, recaptured Hanoi from Japan in September 1945. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam, with Ho Chi Minh as chairman, was formed. The new Republic of Vietnam. The French tried to re-establish themselves in Vietnam using Emperor Bao Dai as their puppet. Initially, the Vietnamese army retreated against the mighty French army, but after 8 long years of war, it successfully recaptured Hanoi in 1954. The peace negotiations in Geneva after the French defeat imposed division of the country on Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh's Democratic Republic was formed in north and Bao Dai's regime was established in south. Bao Dai's regime was overthrown by Dien Dinh Diem. Dien Dinh Diem was anti-communist, repressive and dictatorial. He retained Ordinance 10, a French law that permitted Christianity but outlawed Buddhism. His dictatorial rule was opposed by the National Liberation Front. NLF joined with Ho Chi Minh to unify Vietnam. The entry of the US into the war. The US considered the NLF-Ho Chi Minh alliance as a threat. It feared establishment of communist governments in the region after Ho Chi Minh's victory. To prevent the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, the US intervened militarily in 1965. It attacked Vietnamese villages and jungles using chemical weapons. Despite larger army, superior technology and best medical facilities, the US could not match the war tactics of the Vietnamese army. Due to the war, the world opinion turned against the US policymakers. Even within the US, it was criticized for initiating a war with slim chances of victory. The Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, stretching from North Vietnam to South Vietnam, provided logistics support to the Vietnamese army. It was a maze of footpaths and roads used to transport men and material during war. Most of the trail passed through the neighboring Laos and Cambodia. Branches from these countries extended to South Vietnam. It had support bases and hospitals all along. The supplies were mostly carried by female porters. Young volunteers kept open 2,195 kilometers of strategic roads and guarded 2,500 key points on the trail. The US bombarded the trail many times to disrupt supplies, but failed as the Vietnamese quickly repaired it. Ho Chi Minh Trail, the greatest engineering feat of Vietnam, helped the country win this war against the superpower with its limited resources. The nation and its heroes. Women as rebels. Traditionally, the Vietnamese women enjoyed gender equality far more than their Chinese counterparts, but they had no say in determining their own future. They had a negligible public life. With the nationalist movement, a new image of womanhood emerged. Women who rebelled against established social norms were glorified by the thinkers and writers. Breaking conventions announced the arrival of new women in the Vietnamese society. Heroes of past times. Rebel women from the past were also extolled highly by the writers and thinkers to inspire people. In 1913, Phan Boi Chau wrote a play depicting the life of the Trung sisters who fought against Chinese domination in 39 to 43 CE. Since Phan Boi Chau's play, the sisters were revered evermore. They became a subject of paintings, plays, and novels. They symbolized the unaccessible will and unsurpassed patriotism of the Vietnamese. The sisters had gathered a force of 30,000 soldiers and given a tough fight to the Chinese for 2 years. When defeat looked certain, they committed suicide instead of surrendering to the enemy. Another most revered female figure is Trieu Ao, an orphan child who lived with her brother. On growing upon, she left for the jungles to organize a large army and fight back the Chinese rule. When her army was defeated, she drowned herself. She is still an inspiration in Vietnam. Women as warriors. In 1960s, women were looked upon as great warriors. Photographs in magazines and journals featured women as brave fighters. Nguyen Thi Duong, a woman warrior, was said to have shot down a jet with just 20 bullets single-handedly. Women were also portrayed as workers. They had rifle in one hand and hammer in the other. Women joined the army when the number of casualties in the war shot up. They contributed to the building 6 airstrips, neutralizing bombs, transporting cargo, weapons, and shooting down 15 planes. From 1965 to 1975, almost 80% of the youth working on the trail were women. Women in times of peace. By the late 70s, peace talks were initiated to end the war soon. Women now were portrayed mostly as workers engaged in agricultural, cooperatives, factories, and production units. The end of the war. The long-drawn war evoked criticism for US globally and also from within the US. The US could neither achieve its objective nor crush or gain support of the Vietnamese people. Peace settlement in Paris in January 1974 ended the war. It ended conflict with the US, but the conflict between Saigon regime and the NLF continued. The NLF captured the presidential palace in Saigon on April 30, 1975 and unified Vietnam. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learnt. The French conquest of Vietnam began in 1858 and completed by 1885. After French control of Tonkin and Annam in 1887, the French Indochina was formed. Like other European nations, France also took upon itself to bring the benefits of civilization to the backward people in Asia. Colonies were to serve interests of the mother country was accepted universally. The term liberalism, Latin, root liber, means free. The French imposed their modern ideas on the locals at the cost of destruction of their culture, religion, and traditions. The students and teachers did not follow the curriculum prescribed by the French. Teachers often modified and criticized the text material. The students' struggle against French colonial education became a battle against French colonialism and Vietnamese independence. Well laid out sewer pipes, the French city's symbol of modernity became a cause of plague in the city. Resistance to the spread of Christianity and French control led to the Scholars' Revolt in 1868 by the officials at the imperial court. Nationalist Phan Boi Chau, 1867 to 1940, and Phan Chu Trinh, 1871 to 1926, both resisted the French rule through their own different ideologies. In the early 20th century, many Vietnamese students went to Japan to attain modern education, primarily to oust the French colonists, overthrow the puppet emperor, and re-establish the Nguyen dynasty. The French efforts to re-establish themselves in Hanoi were thwarted by the Vietnamese army. The peace negotiations in Geneva after the French defeat imposed division of the country on Vietnam. Bao Dai's regime was overthrown by Ngo Dinh Diem. Ngo Dinh Diem was anti-communist, repressive, and dictatorial. The National Liberation Front joined with Ho Chi Minh to unify Vietnam. To prevent establishment of communism in Southeast Asia due to the NLF Ho Chi Minh alliance, the US intervened militarily in 1965. It attacked Vietnamese